are at the halfway stage of the season and taking us on a journey of a mid-season review. I was trying to be poetic then, Pete, but it just didn't work. Can you take over? Bail me out on that, yeah.
Along, and always, as always, there's lots and lots to talk about. It's been a huge week for the Crows with, one of the most exciting bits of play I think I can remember for a long, long time. That's, of course, the Jono Beach goal. We'll talk about it in detail a bit later on. But I was Jono's team manager at Westies under-17s, and when he was a young 16-year-old, and a nicer lad you'd never meet. And I was very, very excited for him, and I'm sure that he was just thinking about me just after he kicked that goal. Not, but I was thinking of him, and it was terrific to see. Lots of other stuff going on, and to give us the information of all the news that's going on in and around the AFL, we have got Nicky's news.
Take us away, Nicky.
All right, I think we have to start with Alistair Clarkson, who tried to mitigate his penalty after his temper got the better of him and him not being able to not criticise umpires. Even if he's asked by a journalist, he could have not said anything, but nope, it's Alistair Clarkson. He's got to get it out because he's hard done by. So $20,000, of which $15,000 of that is suspended until the end of the season. So I'm not sure whether that means he does have to pay it or not.
No,
but
it's only if he re-offends.
Yeah. He did have to pay $5,000, but it went towards the freeze at the G. Yeah. I did think it was very strategic that all of a sudden he was on at half-time of the Carlton and GWS game to talk about it. I'm thinking, yeah, Hawthorn was trying to get on the front foot. Didn't work.
You never see him in the media otherwise. He's had about 5 or 6 sanctions in his coaching career.
Yes.
Alistair. And, it's a bit of a wet lettuce leaf of a slap over the wrist, I reckon, that $5,000.
Well, there's something else which is kind of interesting, is that the AFL are actually looking into Maxwell and where he's been positioning himself as a runner for the Giants. So apparently he was on the ground for quite a large period of time, and he was often positioning himself at the edge of the centre square when Carlton were doing kick-outs. So essentially he was taking up a space.
Yep, basically blocking up the corridor.
Yep. So it's very interesting that they've actually come out and announced that the AFL is actually looking into it.
It's been going on for years. Yep. Absolutely years.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you how long that's been going on. And I reckon they'd looked at this previously and, as usual, gave their wet lettuce leaf to it. And it's just continued.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to be on and off the runners. But Maxwell stays out there, and he's been looked at before for coaching on the ground.
Yes, he has.
Yeah.
Who was that Port Adelaide dickhead that used to do all of the running for Port Adelaide?
Armfield?
Armfield, yeah. And he used to coach.
He used to play.
Yeah.
He was a player.
He was playing and coaching.
Well, he probably got as many touches as some of the Port guys did.
He just didn't have a Guernsey. Yeah. He just didn't have a Guernsey, but he was playing. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, it should be simple. This whole... I reckon we're getting to the point where runners shouldn't be allowed on the field, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but there should be a minimal, only for a very minimal amount of time.
Why do we need a runner? Name one other sport in the universe that has a runner.
Could not agree more, Fane. I could not agree more. And you're absolutely right. There is no other sport that has this ridiculous thing of a coach being able to send a guy out to give messages and stand in play, and it's just ridiculous.
A lot of the other sports, though, the coach is actually on the sidelines, so he's able to yell out instructions to his players that way, whereas we've got our coaches up in a box.
Yeah, but the reason
We
why
can
they're
stand
up
on the
in a,
sidelines if we want.
they used to
could
be
do.
they used to be down in the boundary line, Nikki.
They did.
And then they were allowed to send runners out, so they thought stuff it would just go and sit up in the stand.
Did the runners start to come in when the interchange was brought in?
No, they've always
No, I've been around for years.
So they have been around for years.
There's always been a runner. Always.
Yeah. I just feel like it's... I mean, I know some of these other sports have got timeouts and, like you say, coaches within earshot and all the rest of it, but I think it's time to have a look at whether we need runners at all.
I thought it was kind of interesting in the game on Monday where they pulled Petrarca off after he kicked a goal. And he was shitty as. Yeah, and he was shitty as. He didn't want to come off. He did. He was whinging and complaining on the bench, like, why'd you pull me off? And 2 minutes later, he goes back on.
30 seconds.
Could you rephrase? Nikki, could you just rephrase that slightly?
Macca.
Come on, mate.
Macca.
It was very interesting, though, that it kind of fitted in with BT's little whinge fest he has at the moment about sports scientists and them being in control and pulling players off. And so he was using... Stop it. He was using it as a way to say that he was right. Because, look, now he's back on. And he did end up being the match winner for the Melbourne in any case.
Yeah, there's been a few. I mean, we've had the situation where Tex has been dragged off after kicking a goal, and now with Petrarca, and there's countless other examples. And it seems again another inexact sort of mechanism run by the sports scientists in terms of monitoring GPS numbers and all the rest of it. But, it makes you wonder whether that's another thing that's going to be addressed eventually, where coaches are basically insisting that players stay on simply because of that good old-fashioned thing called momentum.
And the problem also comes that in order to come off the ground, how long it takes, and with the AFL desire to speed up the game so much, that the only time you've really got a chance to do that interchange is when it is after a goal's been kicked. And you can get off then. But it's such a difficulty that they have to try and balance as to when they can or can't get on or off the ground. And we have seen it this year with it being highlighted that players are stuck on the bench trying to come on, but of course the play's on the other side of the ground.
Yeah, it's and vice versa. We've had players stuck on the sidelines that should be coming back on, like Sloaney and that a few weeks ago. Where the player was on the other side of the ground, they just couldn't get on. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you said something, Phoenix, which I think is very, very important, and that's momentum. And I've never been able to understand it myself why when a player looks like, and they haven't been doing much, and the ball hasn't been coming down, then all of a sudden they do something brilliant and get a goal. Leave them on, because all of a sudden their spirits are high, their confidence is high, and then, they might get you another one.
Yeah, exactly. And look at basketball, Macca. If someone gets a hot hand, he stays on. If someone starts getting hot from outside the 3-point line or whatever, not only does he stay on, but they feed in the ball. They keep going to him because they understand that he's got the momentum with his shot. He's in the zone. Why would you take a player off in the middle of that sort of a streak in Aussie rules football, which is a game all about momentum?
Particularly when it's a forward player that's got and when they come off, they might have kicked a goal from 25 metres out on a sharp angle. Then they've got to run the whole distance back to the bench. So any idea of giving them a rest, well, they're buggered by the time they get there.
Anyway.
So basically, I think that was the main kind of things that came out.
Well, I thought one interesting thing I heard that during the week is about Kelly from GWS, that GWS are making their pitch to Kelly for him to stay, but not in Sydney. They followed him to Melbourne and make it to him in Melbourne. I thought that was very odd.
No, I think that is
that's where his
because
family is, isn't it?
yeah, it was after their game, so they were all still in Melbourne, and that's where they had the meeting with him and his manager. And apparently, what's been offered is, or the GWS have tried to offer him a 2-year deal. Now, I don't think that's what GWS would want to offer. I think that's what's been stipulated by his manager, is he might consider staying for 2 years to get a premiership and then he will leave.
Yeah, I reckon that's pretty smart on GWS's behalf, because if they try to sign him up for a long period of time, then it becomes a real bidding auction. What they've put in now is an alternative, which maybe gives him the opportunity, as you said, to win a flag, and in the process, even get his form up even higher again, and maybe even more dollars.
Am I missing something? He's not a free agent.
No.
No.
So why don't they just tell him to get stuffed? Like, honestly.
Because unfortunately, the way the Players Association has set it up, and the AFL's allowed them to have this much control in a way that if there's any trades to be stipulated, they have to agree to it.
If there was ever going to be a club that could wear not getting anything for a player, it's GWS.
GWS, yeah.
And I would be saying to Josh Kelly, here's the contract, take it or leave it. We're not trading you.
Yeah.
You'll go to Brisbane or you'll go to Carlton. You know,
Well, Carlton apparently are circulating already.
Carlton are after him, actually.
Yeah, well, Carlton were after Fife until it looked more like Fife was going to stay.
Brisbane will finish bottom, so I think it's a fair point that you make, Fiend, that they could do it. They are a club that could afford to make that kind of stand. But I suspect that what will happen is that they'll get pressure from the AFL, who own them, and that they won't want to be seen to be disturbing the Players Association, the almighty and the all-conquering Players Association, and he will end up going wherever he likes.
Yeah.
That's what will happen.
Yeah, you're right, Pete. This whole player movement thing is really starting to become a bit of a farce. It's almost a parody, really.
It is.
You know, we've got players that are just coming out of their first or second contracts, all of a sudden dictating where they need to go. What happened to, the clubs holding sway until, like, why did we even bring in free agency? Because it doesn't seem as if it's actually required. It's just another mechanism to get a player out of a club that he doesn't want to be at.
It was brought in as kind of like that. You've been at a club for a long time. Here's your service, because you've earned this particular right, that you've been there a long time, etc. But it's now basically meant players are only in their second, third year, that they feel that they have the right to work under free agency as well, even though they haven't earned that right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nikki. And the really bad example that I think was the chap that went to Fremantle, who even stood out of football for a year, even though when he was under contract at GWS.
McCarthy.
Yeah, and he hadn't really earned these stripes, and I thought that was ridiculous.
And that's where they did actually make a stand, because he did start to do some training at Freo, and the AFL found out about it and then went, no, you're not allowed to do that. He's not allowed to have any contact with you because he's still a GWS contracted player.
At least, though, in that circumstance, I mean, he obviously went home for reasons, and those reasons were compelling enough for him to want to stand out of top-level football for a year. At least there was a consequence of him doing what he was doing. But in the Kelly case, he's just dictating terms. And to me, it makes a mockery of the whole draft system. And it's, again, we had the situation at draft time where kids aren't allowed to, quote-unquote, tamper with the draft. But then at every other stage of their playing careers, particularly if they've got some value, they can tamper with the whole system.
Yeah, and it's been suggested that perhaps when a player is drafted for the very first time. We only get drafted once, really. But when they drafted, they get drafted for a 3 or 4 year period to stop this attempt to be moving around, particularly when they can actually cause movement at the end of their second year. So I personally am in favour of it, and I'd say certainly a minimum of 3 and preferably 4.
Well, we're in the same position with Lever. I mean, how long has Jake Lever been going? 3 years?
Yeah.
And you're looking at Godfather contracts for him, and also McGovern as well. So, and he's been only going 3 years as well, I guess. So, it's happening everywhere, and it used to be that it was players that were established and they were 6, 7, 8 years into their career. But what we're seeing now is clubs actually target guys that are still on the potential sort of ladder. And I think that in some way, I guess, by getting them at that point, to circumvent the fact that when you're getting them as a drafted player, you're investing, 3 years into them, and then you're losing them to free agency 4 years after that.
Yeah.
So why do that? Why not let them go, let them be developed, and then target them at the 3 to 4 year mark, knowing that you're then safe from them going on free agency?
Particularly with key position players, Pete, who often do take a bit of time. I think there's been a few cases where bigger blokes have gone to another club, halfway through their development, and Mumford's probably a case in point. There's a few others, and you just sort of think, well, there's no cohesion in the system. I mean, if you want to have a situation where players can leave 3 or 4 years into their contract, then really the draft age should be lifted. It should be up to age 20, so that the development happens prior to them hitting the system, so that the clubs aren't carrying the development costs. Because you're absolutely right, clubs are carrying development costs, and as Vardy points out in the chat, we actually allowed Dangerfield to stand out for his first year of footy, to finish his year 12. Now, did we get any value out of that? That was still counted as a year's service in terms of his free agency situation. I mean, whilst the draft situation is slanted very heavily towards the clubs, obviously, the clubs are still taking a punt at draft time, and there doesn't seem to be any real mechanism for the clubs to maintain control over their list if players want to go, and it seems most prevalent with the non-Victorian teams.
Yeah, and the Players Association, they're pushing to make it a free agency come down even lower. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. But sadly, the AFL are backing them virtually by either just standing by and watching or secretly encouraging them on the side. And I don't understand this, why they would even want to encourage it. Because
they're shit scared, Macca.
Yeah.
They're shit scared someone's going to take down the system.
Yep. That's what it boils down to.
The issue is, as I explained in the chat when Dan Squid pointed out the reason this is all coming is money. It's the players who want the US system where they want those contracts and they want the freedom of movement. What they've forgotten was that US system was allowed for those players to have that freedom of movement, with the caveat that the clubs that they're aligned to can trade them at the drop of a hat without their knowledge or permission.
Correct.
So it's got to be both ways, whereas it's come in on this end here in Australia, or in the AFL, where the players have this control, but the clubs are still dictated to by the players.
Yep.
Oh, and also they've built it on that US model. When in actual fact, in the US, the kids are used to moving around anyway because nobody goes to university in their hometown. They all move anyway, and also you're just as liable to be a star from any state in the US. Whereas we've got a Victoria-centric system whereby the junior, or the system that's feeding through to the AFL seniors, is it's massively lopsided to kids coming out of Victoria because of their population, and they just have obviously a lot more kids that are drafted, and so you've got a preponderance then of kids who want to go back to Victoria.
Yep.
Yeah. And it comes back down to what you're saying before, Pete, that there's an inherent flaw in the system legally, and they don't want the house of cards to fall, so they don't push the issue too much. But it's becoming like, even you've seen how long this CBA negotiation has dragged out. I mean, there's a reason for that, and that's because the players have got so much power. And there'll come a point where it's just physically not workable anymore, because it'll be too far slanted in the players' favour, and shit's going to hit the fan at that point.
And that's actually even held up, because whilst people are jumping up and down about Lever, and he's been pretty upfront that he just wants it done, but we've got to wait for the CBA, and he's very happy with staying here. The same things actually was announced, I think it was today or it was yesterday, that Zaharakis has done exactly the same thing at Essendon, and he's put off the contract talks, but purely because, and his statement is, until the CBA is sorted, then I'll chat to the club and we'll get it done.
He said that on Sunday on the footy shows.
Yeah.
Now he's not going anywhere, clearly.
No.
He's an Essendon player through and through, and yet he's holding up and the players have got a right to do that. I mean, clearly he's got a right to wait and see what the pie is before he negotiates his slice of it. But why is it we haven't heard anything about it? And I'm just wondering, the only thing I've heard is Dangerfield talking about, the I's and the T's being looked after before they release it. But this has dragged on. This is supposed to be negotiated and finalised before the beginning of the season. We're now 12 rounds in.
Yeah, what they reckon is that they have agreed on terms, they've agreed on all the detail, and apparently because it is a document that will contain a lot of detail in it, that's what's going to take the time to make sure that it truly represents what the two parties have agreed, and that there are no slip-ups in the creation of that document. And that I heard Gillan McLaughlin talking about that, and that was the reason that he gave. Basically, it's all agreed, and I can't see why we can't have that given to us, so that or an all club, so that they can negotiate with their players.
Well, you would have thought that the clubs would be across the CBA like at a high level, so that they would understand what they're dealing with. Obviously the devil's in the detail, but surely the detail doesn't really impact, whether player X gets, 400,000 or 450,000. They should already know what the pie is.
Yeah, you would think that, but the way that we haven't had these contracts starting to be sorted, whereas I think the last time the CBA was still up in arms a little bit, but there was contracts being agreed to with some caveats, etc. Kind of makes me think that maybe they don't fully know.
Well, they should really. They have representation, don't they?
No, the AFL does it. And it's the AFL that's talking to the AFLPA. Now, if they haven't told the clubs, or they've only told them some general stuff, that makes it very hard for the clubs to do anything about it.
If that's the case, yes. And I can see that the AFL might even do that, because waiting for all the detail to be finalised and signed off in case just something changes and all falls over. But it does make life awkward, because it should be attended to a bit quicker.
All right, we'll probably...
welcome to Gil running the AFL in confidence.
We'll move along from that subject. Nikki, any final comments out of news?
No, there's going to be some nice things in Cockwomble, and I think they all might be related around a team that you love to hate, Pete.
Look, I've got my own big Cockwomble nomination for tonight, so I'm looking forward to that segment.
Yeah.
Does it start with Robbie Gray or Wingard?
No, it's a different one. But just perhaps turning to the game last week, have a quick chat about that. I was at the game. It was a pretty uninspiring, lacklustre kind of affair, I thought. But always good to get the win, 57-point win. You really shouldn't complain. But I think you could tell in the first 15 minutes of the game that St Kilda did not turn up, and we were not going to get the test, the pressure test that we really needed. But anyway, a win's a win. And as I alluded to earlier in the show, I was absolutely thrilled for John O'Beach for his whole evening. The footage that the club released of him getting his Guernsey and the speech from Tex was fantastic. And I can't remember a guy getting his debut that has been so celebrated and so revered. I think he's obviously incredibly popular at the football club. There's obviously the story of his mother and the tragedy that surrounded that, but still. And putting all that aside, I just thought he had a pretty good game. He tackled well. He stuck some really, really big tackles just to get himself involved. He took a couple of nice marks. He used the ball well. He made smart decisions and topped it off with a nice goal.
Yeah, he's a very, very competent footballer, and there's no doubt in my mind that he can play at the AFL level if given the opportunity to play regularly. His problem's going to be, of course, is the fact that we've got McGovern lined up, wanting to come back in, and maybe one more for him in the sample, or maybe not. Siegeman, he will definitely play a couple more back there. But it's going to be pressure for spots, and while I think he's very, very capable of playing the positions that he did play on the weekend, his problem is going to be this pressure from below.
There's just something that I wanted to read an excerpt from the president of the West Adelaide Footy Club.
Yes.
Who I think Pete. I think you know him personally, don't you, Lee?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So Lee put something up on Facebook and a few other sites after Jono's game, and I just wanted to read a bit. It says, I watched a lad playing juniors for Westies years ago and was impressed. He looked a natural but had a different kicking style. He progressed to West League team and always played well. Always. That kicking style hadn't changed, but he always found that target and was always a great kick for goal. There was something else we all noticed. He never missed a training session. The AFL clubs ignored him. You need to work on this and that, they told him. He did. He won a premiership. He kicked 8 in a SANFL final. He was upgraded to the Crows senior list, back onto the rookie list and upgraded again. His form was excellent, but still no AFL game. Then Lee goes on and says, last night I saw, and this was obviously written on Saturday, last night I saw number 1 for Adelaide kick a goal, a skillful, composed goal a decade in the making, but a goal greeted with joy by thousands, none more so than those who celebrate the good things in life. The reaction of his teammates said it all, and that reaction was repeated in the hearts of so many. Jono Beach, skill, determination and decency. The West Adelaide Footy Club and all of us are very proud of you. And I think that sort of sentiment from his home club, irrespective of the fact that he hasn't played for Westies for 2 seasons now, 3 seasons, indicates probably the kind of lad that we're dealing with here.
Oh, quality individual, no doubt about that. He's absolutely quality, and I'd love to see him hold a spot in there. But
who's taking that point up, Macca, and you guys will remember probably a couple of years ago that I was on the Jono Beach train very, very early on, because obviously having known him from Westies. Macca, I'll take issue with you on this, and he played on the wing on Friday night, almost exclusively on the wing.
Yes, he did.
And so I'm not quite sure what Mitch McGovern coming in will have to do with Jono Beach. I don't think that has anything to do with him at all. And I'm not sure who would be pushing from underneath that would be taking a wing spot, given the fact that Dave McKay, I think his run has come to an end. I was at the parade on Saturday and he was dreadful. No
Did you see him
there.
start the fight?
Oh, look, I tried to. I actually didn't see that, to be honest, Nicky. I was in the northern end, and so I'm not quite sure where that was. And I did leave at 3/4 time, I have to say. But for the 3/4 that I saw, he was useless.
Yeah.
And as useless as you would expect him to be in an AFL game. And so I'm just not quite sure. What I saw on Friday night was a very, very professional and competent wingman who played a stay-at-home wingman's role. And I'm just not sure who would be pushing up that would be taking his spot.
I think, really, if you're looking like for like, the only other player that could be pushing for that type of role is Menzel, and I'd take Beach at this stage over Menzel just because of output.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But also, Siegeman, if the seed makes the side, He and Smith.
But Seaman will come in for somebody who will play wing, but also down the back lines.
Probably Jake Kelly, I reckon.
What I'm going to say is that last time he was in, he was rotating with Smith. They were going halfback, wing, halfback, wing, halfback, wing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the dangers I see for Jono.
No,
But Jono can play down back as well.
Yeah.
He actually has quite a bit of flexibility in where he's able to play.
Beach
So
also
he's
gives
great
us
for the
some
modern game.
Yeah, it gives us some defensive strength as well, Macca, which I don't think can be underestimated. I think when McGovern comes in, that'll be the end of Andy Otten. I think if Seedsman's right, we're probably looking at restructuring through Jake Kelly's halfback flank. And they can certainly rotate Seedsman and Smith on that other side. But I would imagine that if Beach's form continues and if they give him the opportunity to have 2 or 3 cracks at it, then I think he stays in. PJ Crow's mentioning in the chat that he doesn't want Seed. The reason I wouldn't mind Seed in the team is simply because he takes some heat off Brodie Smith and gives us another avenue for metres gained with those long raking kicks.
Yeah, well, just coming back to Jono Beach, look, I genuinely hope that he gets 2 to 3 games to prove that he belongs in the side permanently, and that my intuition says that if he's given that opportunity, he probably would actually do that. But as I said, there will be pressure from below with those players, and I think I know nobody agreeing with me about the competition, but unless they do what you're saying, Phoenix, but Jake Kelly, he played very well at halfback. He's earned his spot.
Yeah, the trouble with Jake, well, it's not Jake per se, but I think the trouble with the structure when you've got Jake Kelly down there, our rebound is very easily negated, and it would just be nice to have another running defender to complement Brodie and give us another avenue out if Brodie's getting sat on, which seems to be part of the quote-unquote blueprint. So I think we're a little bit slow off our half-back line. Rory Laird's not a quick player. Jake's not a quick player. And not only are they not quick, but they don't gain a lot of ground with their kicking. Whereas Brodie Smith and, to a degree, Paul Seedsman, they will kick over a line and they give us some territory.
Yeah, true. I can't argue against that. I'm just putting up the possibilities, that's all. I'm not saying John O'Beat shouldn't be there. I'm not saying that he won't be there. I'm just pointing out what are the possibilities.
No, that's fair enough, Macca. And I wasn't having a go. I just was curious as to where that pressure from underneath would come from. There's another thing I just wanted to, while we're just speaking about John O'Beach, in my time watching football, I've rarely seen the kind of reaction and emotion that surrounded that game on Friday night for him, and I just wonder what's the word I'm trying to think of? What value, I guess, do you put on a player who has that kind of really uniting effect on a team, and then not only does that, but gets his hands dirty with some really big crunching tackles, and just some good disposal and some. Do you know what I'm trying to say? A guy that just actually brings a side together like that. What's the almost like the non-material value of a guy like that?
Yeah, it's an intangible,
Sorry, that was the word I was trying to think of, mate.
There we go.
Yeah, but basically, what it does for Jono, if it's a line ball decision between him and somebody else, it works in his favour.
Yeah, but I think also what Pete's getting at is what effect does it have on the rest of the team? Look,
and I
think the novelty's probably worn off now, to be honest.
They all think he's a prick now, do they?
No, but I mean, he's just another player now. He's had his first game. He's kicked his first goal. You know I think Beachy would be embarrassed if every time we got a touch, he got game tackled by Charlie.
I don't think that would happen. But I'm just talking about the understated effect of a player like that, who is just so good for team synergy.
And what I think you also need to consider is what's happened to this team, is what loss has happened to the team. And I think that was also compounded by how they feel about family, etc. And the fact that, from what I hear, the club and particularly the players think of themselves as family. And so then finding out that Jono lost his mum last year very quickly. We've had the tragedy in the club, but then we've got Harry Deer, who's lost his auntie, who he was very close to this year as well. I think there's just a little bit of galvanisation that's gone on.
Yeah, but without being hard.
That shows through in the team ethos that they are willing to work for each other and they do want to succeed for each other. And I think that's what Pete's getting at.
Yeah, but I'm also with Phoenix. And I'm not being hard-hearted, Nicky, but that only lasts for a little time. It all comes back to performance in the long run.
Yeah, and not only that, you can say, and I don't want to be hard-hearted either because, I recognise what you guys are saying, but the time to show that you're playing for your mates is when the ball's there to be won in a 50-50 contest at Geelong when you're 4 goals down, not when you're downhill skiing at Adelaide Oval 6 goals up.
Yeah, and
is that harsh? Do you know what I mean, though, don't you?
No, it's not. But, if he turned in 2 McKay-like performances in the next 2 games, that intangible goodwill would soon disappear.
Oh, yeah, look, that's what I'm saying is predicated on the fact that he finds the football. And I said this right at the very start when we picked him up. The reality is I said this as soon as he was rookied, that he will play good SANFL football. He will play enough good games to get himself picked because he's just a good footballer and he has been for a long time. And that has come to fruition and he has been picked. And if he's allowed to, he will play good football for us as well. He'll play good football for the Crows. I mean, that was his debut game and he got 15 possessions and just looked right at home.
Yeah, I hope so.
And so he'll play good football. So it's something that I guess the point, and I'll let this go now because I don't want to labour it, but it's something over and above. We assume that they play good football because you can't survive in that environment without playing good football. It's something that is added to that, if that makes sense.
Talking about somebody adding something to the team, Greenwood. Got a comment on Greenwood.
He's been fantastic.
He was bloody brilliant with his hands on the weekend, and that was his 3rd game, and he hadn't played for 18 years. This guy, I believe, will go on to be something special.
I think somebody pointed out that in Supercoach, he's actually getting 1 Supercoach point per minute that he's on the ground, which is better than like any other player in the league. And he's only having limited game time, and that's the impact he's having.
I mean, he's only played 3. This was his 3rd game of football, and I think he was at Phoenix about 16 contested possessions.
16 out of 17, yeah.
And that's quite amazing.
Yeah,
I do love that in the plays of the week they highlighted that little bit he did using his body to get in and under and then just come away with the ball.
Yeah. He's sneaky agile in close, great composure, and let's hope that he can continue to build up his engine because it'd be nice to be able to get him on the ground for more than 60% of a game. He certainly gives us something, and I continue to think that I'm looking at a young Pendlebury when I watch him weave through some of those tight situations, and that would be a bit of a bonus from the Category B rookie list.
Well, Graham Corns was talking about it, and he...
do we still listen to? Is Studley still talking sense or
no, not usually, but he did make sense on this occasion. He was talking about, for example, Matty Crouch. When Matty Crouch first started, he was very, very good at getting contested ball, and he was getting no ball on the outside, non-contested possessions. And he pointed out that I think that Matty Crouch might have been our leader in non-contested possessions on the weekend, if you're not very, very high up, and while still getting plenty of contested ball. And as he said, that Matty Crouch has grown from being, just a footballer to very, very good footballer in a very short period of time by adding that dimension to his game. And he said that the longer Greenwood plays, he will eventually add that to his game as well. And he said, and he agreed too, that could really make him a very, very good footballer.
Well, I think we're blessed to have a pair, one guy in his third game and one guy in his first game, who are big-bodied midfield types that both cracked in and laid some crunching tackles on the weekend, and have that capacity. So it's not like we're bringing up raw 18-year-olds that are getting knocked about. These guys are slotting in and playing good football from the get-go.
It is a very good point.
Yeah, it does show the benefit of size and maturity, doesn't it, Pete? You bring in a guy like Gallucci, and whilst he looks classy, he doesn't give you any real presence, whereas you bring in a guy like John O'Beach or Hugh Greenwood, you get a bit of presence around the contest as well as skill.
I have to say, just on mentioning the Gallucci, Nikki, were you at the parade on Saturday?
Yep. I was down the other end from you in the stands.
I thought his ball use was exquisite. It was just immaculate. He was zipping out 30 to 40 metre, hard, low passes that were just lacings out. Now, he only had 14 touches and he didn't feature in the best, but the ball that he got, his ball use was something special.
He just needs to learn to kick for goal. And I also love that his confidence he has, because he knows the pace and he knows he would always check to see which player it was. Okay, yep, I can run ahead of you. And if he kind of figured out, no, I have to get rid of it, he made the right decision to get rid of it. And that's a really nice bit of maturity he was showing.
Yeah, I really liked his game on Saturday. That's just an aside, since you mentioned him, Fang.
Yeah.
Should we talk about the SNFL game a little bit, because you were there as well?
Yeah, you can do. If everyone wants to have a quick chat about that.
What do you think of McGovern?
To be honest, I didn't notice him a lot. I noticed Menzel quite a bit. I thought that Menzel had a real good game. Probably the best I've seen him play, in a total game. But I didn't notice McGovern a lot. I didn't think. I thought his game was a little bit overrated, to be honest.
I think because you said you're up the northern end, a lot of the good stuff he was doing was down.
Yeah, well, that could be
the southern end.
Well, could be true. And a lot of Menzel's good stuff was at the northern end.
Yeah, although there was that goal he kicked on in a pocket, which was just outstanding. And he turns to the crowd and the finger up, and it's just like deathly silence. It's like, wouldn't have happened in an AFL game.
So, what did you think of McGovern's game, Nikki?
He just looked a class above everybody else that was out there. I was really pleased that in the highlights of the SNFL game, they show the bit where he took off from the back corner of the square and just sprinted flat out. So you only see a small section of it, and once you realise how far away he came, and he was running at speed to hit the tackle, that was very good. And they also put in the couple of other highlights of him just holding off a little bit, just seeing where the handball was going, and then just waltzing through and stealing the ball from Norwood players as they tried to handball it out. He just seemed that class above everybody else.
Yeah, I'm happy to stand corrected on that assessment, because I was deep in the northern end, and so I probably missed quite a bit.
And Norwood is a horrible ground to watch. You kind of can't see, if you're at one end, you can't really see what's going on down the other end. And I thought Himmelberg looked a little tired, that maybe it's getting up to him, but he still kept trying. Really liked Harry Deer's game down back. I thought he's just grown into that position so nicely.
I like Wiggy's game as well. Wiggy had a very good game.
I did say on Sunday I had an issue with a couple of things he was doing in the first half, which I could see might be why he's not being considered. Because whilst everything else about it was excellent, the one thing he was trying to shirk in terms of responsibility was manning up when Norwood had the ball. And he would really try and pick somebody he knew they weren't going to pass to, so he didn't have to do any effort.
That's not a bonus. What about Polke?
Nice solid game. Kicked the winner really nice one. But yeah, he did some nice bullocking work with that bigger body. Played through the midfield again fairly exclusively. I think he's building nicely. Probably won't debut this year. But I think we've definitely got one there. Really like Benjamin on the wing.
Yeah, I like his game. Very good game.
He's just so smart. The footy decisions he makes, insanely brilliant. Signorello, I think, is a bust. Even though he gave that great handball to Paholke for the winner, he's too slow. And he hasn't cottoned on to the speed of the SANFL.
And his disposal's terrible.
You haven't given credit to David McKay for consistency. He gets 13 possessions in AFL, he gets 13 in SAFL.
He was horrible. I don't think, apart from, you'd say McGovern, obviously, but apart from that, I don't think there was anybody that you would say was immediately, smashing down the door, apart from Harry Wigg. But I just, if they haven't picked him so far, I just have a feeling they're just not going to pick him all year.
No,
so I think the door's shut for Harry, and he needs to look for another club. I think
he needs to learn. He has to go and get the hubble. He seems tentative at times.
I think that he's been, he's just been not very well treated at our club, and I think that he almost left at the end of last year was the pretty reliable word that I had, and again, pretty reliably informed that he was pretty much out the door. They offered him, they wanted him to stay. He was only prepared to stay on a 1-year deal. That was at his behest, not the club's. So it wasn't one of those dead man walking contracts. That was him, I think, giving the club one more chance. He'll be out the door at the end of this year, no question about it. And there'll be no shortage of suitors. Any other club that does any kind of scouting will know that he just continues to rack up best players for the SNFL side. So he'll go somewhere. He'll find a home somewhere.
I think you'll find him go to Gold Coast.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Follow Jared Lyons, maybe. But and that'll be a sad loss, I think. But I don't think that other than Harry Wigg, Mitch McGovern, I don't think anyone was desperately, knocking down the door for selection next week.
My last comment.
You would say that Duday and Cheney were solid without being spectacular.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed by either of them.
You've answered my next question, Nikki.
I'm doing well then.
So, as a club, given that we're halfway through, and given that we've had some concerning losses and some good wins, where do we all reckon that we sit at the half? I mean, obviously, you can't complain being 9-3 and sitting on top, but I'm interested to hear what people think at the halfway point.
Well, one thing is obviously we're a team that's got a lot of talent. You don't win 9 games out of 12 if you haven't got any talent. That we have a little weakness, and that's in the midfield, and that's been compounded by the fact that in the games we've lost, and they're sitting on Rory and keeping Rory down to very minuscule contribution towards the game, and this alleged blueprint that Geelong have got to get us beaten. I don't know how that's going to work on the MCG, but that remains to be seen. But having said that, I think that we're there and thereabouts. But I'm not really sure whether we're good enough to win the big one. I'm not really sure.
I think we all talked about at the start of the year that our concern was the midfield. And I would say that some of those concerns have been partly allayed because there's been a step up from lesser players. We probably, as looking at it now, probably want a little bit more output. And as you said, Macca, that's where our issue is in terms of we were relying too heavily on Sloan and we need to work a way around it. Overall, you'd be satisfied with where we are at the moment. But I think it's good to know that whilst we've been playing well, we can still improve.
I have to say that I don't feel in my gut that we've improved markedly from 2016. I feel like we're just marking time a little bit with our 2016 form, and that is that we're quite adept at absolutely smashing the lower and mid-range teams. But there is still this doubt that is over our side when it plays another team that is strong and hard and pressure at the body and at the ball. And we've seen teams do that to us and then sort of fall over the next week because they can't sustain that kind of level. But it's obviously a physically taxing, an aggressive style of game that's employed against us. But we've seen it, and it's been laid bare for all to see that there is definitely a way that you play Adelaide if you expect to win, and those better teams will be employing those tactics come September. And until we can find a way to get round that tactic, a way to get Rory Slade into the game when he's being bullied out of it, unless we can get a lift also from Brad Crouch, who for me is the singular most biggest disappointment of the season so far. He is a horrible disposer of the football unless he goes by hand. I saw it again on Friday night where he just runs out of the middle and just kicks to nowhere, to an area that there isn't even close to a player from our side being there. He's just a horrible disposer by foot, and a couple of decent handballs, but really we're just not getting from Brad Crouch what we need, and I'm beginning to wonder whether we ever will. He is just a B-grade midfielder like his brother, and that's not a criticism of Matt, because I really like Matt Crouch, and I agree with everything you said, Macca, about Matt. I think he's having a really good season, but he's a B-grade mid. And so until we can find a way to turn back the tide when we are being pressured and attacked physically, then I still very, very much doubt our ability to come away in September with the prize.
So I've changed my view a little bit over the last week. I think that the evenness of the competition so far this season indicates to me that what we're actually seeing is wins and losses very much around how teams match up against each other. And I don't know whether that's necessarily a bad thing from our perspective, because I think there's only two teams that we don't match up well on that could be in the finals race. One is Melbourne, and the other one is Geelong. And I just get the feeling that this is one of those seasons where there isn't one standout team. GWS have been hampered severely by injuries, which probably brings them back to the pack a little bit, although we beat them with a fairly strong side in round one. Pete, I kind of differ from you in terms of us struggling against top teams, because we've only been beaten by one quote-unquote top teams. The other two teams that have beaten us have been lowly teams. And we've won more games against fellow top 8 contenders than anyone else in the competition. So I don't think it's as cut and dried or as simplistic as good teams. I think it's very much about who we play. We saw Richmond to try to take it to us in physicality could only sustain it for a quarter, simply because it's not the way they play. GWS, despite their talent, they're a run and gun team that want to run forward of the ball. They're never going to be a tough enclosed team. Western Bulldogs are similar. They're hard at the ball, but they're not a high pressure team. They're a run and carry team. So the only team that beats us up on the inside and robs our ability to feed our outside runners is Geelong. And to a lesser degree Melbourne, simply because they're full of hard nuts. So if there was ever a year that you could win by simply making sure you're top two at the business end and then pushing through to home finals, then this would be it, I reckon.
And so for that, with Pete's statement and what you've just said then, Phoenix, so those two games in succession where we've got Melbourne up at TIO, followed by the Cats here, you reckon those are the two that will give us a kind of a really good grounding of where we really are?
Yeah, we've got Sydney as well, who are up and about now.
We don't get them to round 22.
I think
So they'll
those
be
three
peaking.
games are going to be key.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I'd say Phoenix. If I made reference just to top teams, then I'd certainly take that back, because I agree we have got a good record this year against some of the better sides, or at least in terms of where they're positioned. But it's teams that can bring that heat, teams that can bring that pressure, and I think that you're absolutely spot on raising Sydney as a potential threat to us. They're another team that, regardless of their position on the ladder, they bring the heat, and we wilt. So those kinds of teams, probably, as you say, and I think that's probably a fair point that you make, that it's teams that match up well on us in terms of being able to bring that physical pressure.
See, you
I
have
also
a
think
look at
the
our...
Magpies...
Sorry, Nikki. If I could just finish off this point, then you can
That's
have a
okay.
crack. Sorry. If you look at the way we played against St Kilda, we very much brought the aggression and the physicality in the first quarter, and you saw St Kilda not really have an appetite to continue on with that kind of game, and they basically just crowded up the contest after that and turned it into a bit of a slog. But you could probably make a case that just as someone like a Richmond can't go that kind of game plan for 4 quarters, I'd suggest that we would struggle, and we showed that we struggled to maintain that level of physicality for 4 quarters against St Kilda. But the fact that we were able to do it means that it's an attitude thing. It's not a physical thing. It's an attitude thing. When you see Richie Douglas cracking in and Rory Atkins cracking in after they've, been called soft for the majority of the last couple of weeks, they can do it. It's in the head, and I think that's what I took away from the St Kilda game, apart from anything else. It's like, oh, okay, so it's not a physical thing. It's actually just it's a mental thing. So if we can get that level of concentration and commitment from those outside players for longer in games, particularly against your Geelongs and your Melbournes and those physical type teams, if we can get buy-in and concentration from our outside players for longer, I don't think we'll ever get 4 quarters out of them like that, but for longer, then we're a chance of matching it against those teams. But otherwise, if it's left to too few, like Sloaney and Matty Crouch and whatnot, then, we're not going to beat those teams.
All right, well, that's a good discussion about where we are at the moment. I think we probably should move on just to our last segment of the evening, which, of course, is our one of our favourite segments, the Cockwomble of the Week Award. Phoenix, you've got a bit of intro?
Yeah, it's going in the background, so we can just
Beautiful.
continue nicely.
So, Nikki, you can just play on with some nominations.
Oh, I will actually start off with Essendon as the nomination, because they have apparently have form in being out on the ground too long at Etihad, which means that the opposition team that have to run out first don't have time to get their banner on the ground, which holds them up in terms of coming out, which is what happened to Port Adelaide on the weekend. And they've actually released a statement that they've spoken to 6 other clubs that have had the same issue. So I thought that was kind of a bit amusing. And Essendon cheating? Of course not. But that game also gave us 2 fabulous highlights, and I love the fact that they have on the couch last night actually said that they are, if the AFL's not going to do anything about it, they are going to name and shame every week players who do this. So Chad Wingard's fabulous dive, which, to be fair, he did get a slight touch on his face, but
oh no, he didn't. That was
terrible. It was just like, yeah, but it was terrible. It was horrible. But I think Robbie Gray was the worst one, in that he saw Wingard was being held, so Wingard's throwing his arms back trying to get the free kick, and Gray's more interested in appealing to the umpire, going, where's Wingard's free? Whilst he's looking at his opponent running towards the clear ball, which is in near their goals, and he's actually not interested in getting there, contest the ball. His opponent got the ball, and it slingshot out the side, down the other end, and Essendon got a goal.
They were a pair of bloody wimps, those two. You talk about Gray. Robbie Gray his whole night was, if the balls come in for a contested ball, was trying to push back on his opponent all the time, hoping that he'd get a finger or a touch so he could throw himself forward or do whatever, instead of concentrating on getting the ball. And I thought he was absolutely piss poor. And the other one, he should be up on the Olympic diving board after that effort.
So, what did you have, Pete?
One from left field, an AFL journalist by the name of Peter Ryan, who tweeted this evening that I can't quote it because I can't see both at the same time, but and do this as well. But on replay, Jack Watt's goal, ridiculously good. Ran to space, took a bounce, ran 20 to 25 metres, assessed his option, and kicked a drop punt goal on the run. Well, fuck me. If I haven't seen that by about 200 AFL and SNFL and amateur league players over the last 30 years, excuse my language, but if that is not the most ridiculous Vic-centric, Vic media tweet I've ever bloody seen, absolute cockwomble.
Only the issue I'd take with that, 200, about more like about 2,000.
My kid can do that.
To be fair, Watts is a key position player that ran from halfback to make that to make that contest.
Oh, well, good on him.
He did run a long way, and there was a lot of pressure in that moment for that kick because it did steal the game for them. But we have seen players do it before.
Oh yeah,
he did have quite a bit of space.
Well, Pete's right. He did what a professional AFL footballer should have done.
Anyway, sorry, that's and I apologise for the language, but I was overcome. I was overcome by emotion. So we'll edit out that afterwards, man.
No, we won't.
It's not live, is it?
Leave it in.
There's no editing.
Tell you what, it's just as well we're not live. Otherwise,
I haven't edited this show for bloody 18 months, mate. Come on.
Sorry, that's my nomination.
Speaking of Vic-centric, the absolute circle jerking going on about Jeremy Howe's mark, one of the best of all time, and blah, blah, blah. I reckon Birdman took about 20 like that at training. Not to mention...
It's just pathetic.
It was a good mark. He got a good ride.
It was a bloody good mark.
Spectacular. But to say it was one of the best of all time, I mean, for goodness sakes.
No, it's just pathetic.
I didn't like...
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I didn't like the fact they kept going, but he's so amazing because it does it so regularly, and he does it every week, and I feel like going, did you not remember Brett Burton?
Yeah.
He did exactly the same.
Brett Burton was as regular with mark of the year contenders as Eddie was with goal of the year contenders. But my actual nomination is... Sorry, go
on. Burton's mark, that Carlton game, that's still better than Howe's. I really liked Howe's, but that Burton mark was just insane because he did that on Cruiser.
Yeah. And he came from a fair way back too. But my nomination is Mark Robinson. After stuffing up with his tweet about Fasolo the previous week, he's now written an apology letter to Fasolo after being told not to have any communication with Fasolo. But not only has he written an apology letter to Alex Fasolo, but within that apology letter, he's asked for an interview. So he's basically said, it might assist the healing process for both of us if you agree to having a one-on-one interview with me. He's actually written that in his apology letter.
Yep.
What a wanker. Seriously,
a
wanker.
He was talking about it on AFL 360 last night, and his whole point of doing it was he needs to educate me. Guess what, Robbo?
Need to do anything.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. You were told you were wrong, and this is what it was. And if you can't frickin' figure that out yourself...
Well, it's not Alex Fasolo's responsibility to educate
No,
Robbo.
it's not.
It's Robbo's responsibility to educate himself, and he can go and speak to Jeff Kennett or a million other people who work with mental health issues. But to actually badger a bloke who is currently experiencing, a few mental health problems, and to be so opportunistic about it, extremely cynical, and Mark Robinson is losing a lot of friends, and I would actually be surprised if he remains the chief editor or the editor-in-chief at the Herald-Sun for much longer, to be honest with you.
Well, all I can say is it's a very, very strong field this evening, isn't it?
Yeah. I just put in the chat to ask who they think should win, because this is hard.
Well,
Which of them?
I was just going to say, after listening to the three of you make your nominations, all I can conclude there's a lot of wankers around.
Bit like Society Macca.
Righto, Nikki, call one.
Oh, I mean, Robbo got it last week, and that follow-up is just so clueless. Have
we had it back-to-back before?
We
Luke
haven't
Beveridge,
had
I
it back-to-back. Yeah,
Surely Beveridge.
Yeah, Bevo might have done it, as you like to call him, the most punchable face in football, Pete. Every time I see him, that's just all that goes through my head. It's the most punchable face in football. We don't condone hitting people,
No.
but he has that.
Yes, we do.
I just
Nikki.
think
call.
Robbie Gray. I do want to give it.
Robbie Gray it
I
is.
do want to give it to Robbie Gray, just because that's sustained in the fact that we now have the Vic media finally realising this is what he does.
Alrighty, there we go. Time for a wrap up. Fiend, you want to just call out to all of our bits and pieces?
Sure.
How's that for professional?
I don't think I want to be associated with anyone's bits and pieces,
I've
to
got
be
some
honest.
toes.
Look, yeah, don't forget, we don't have any Thursday night Scorpus show this week, obviously, because it's the bye. And obviously then we won't have any main break or Sunday wrap show either, so we won't be back until next Tuesday. But in the interim, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at AFL Crowcast. If you're listening on iTunes, you can give us a rating and a comment on iTunes. It helps us with our rankings on the iTunes there. That's it. That's all we got.
Sounds good, mate. It's been a terrific show. I've really enjoyed having a chat about the footy to you guys. And for all those listening, hope you've enjoyed the show tonight. Thanks, Fiend, Macca and Nikki. Thank you all. Any saved rounds, or are we happy to say goodnight?
Well, Vardy's asking about our website, and
okay.
Unfortunately, Vardy, because our time constraints or our commitments have exceeded what they were when we got the website running, it's just been one of those things that we've had to put on the back burner. So you might see some
I'll put
movement
my hand up there, Vardy. If I put my hand up there, mate, I was intending to do a lot more than I have. I changed jobs this year and have been absolutely inundated, but getting a little bit of clear air in July, and so hoping to crank it back up. And I appreciate, we appreciate the support and the fact that you do have a look at the stuff we put on there. And it's not dead, but we've just had a few issues in the first half of the year.
Medically induced coma right now.
Something like that.
All right. Very good. That's all I've got.
All right. No worries, guys. Thanks, Macca. Thanks, Nikki.
No worries.
Not all.
We'll see you guys
Thanks,
next
everyone,
Tuesday.
for listening, and we'll catch you next Tuesday.
Yeah, not all.